guys, here come the dollies. They got fresh sinkers, hot coffee, and the sweetest smile.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Club Mobile.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
We're glad that you're here. You guys are sticking with us, and we appreciate it.
Yeah,
We
very
do.
nice.
Been a busy week.
It really has. Really, yeah. For both
I
of
went up.
us.
I went up to Boston. You attended a talk on the Air Force
Yeah, on the whole of the
during
8th
World
Air
War II, the
Force
whole of
in
the
World
8th
War
Air
II.
Force.
Yeah.
Um, tell me about that because I feel like I haven't had a chance to really like catch up with
Yeah.
you with that.
Yeah.
Even though we
So,
talk all the time, I feel like that's not something I want like dissected in a text message.
yeah, of course. So it was run by the American Library, which is in Norwich, and
Mm-hmm.
they essentially support all of the documents and books and things on the Air Force as a whole in England during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was set up in 1963
The
as
library.
as a memorial at first,
Okay.
and then it went into becoming a library for all things like for people to come in and learn, for like field trips for kids and stuff.
I love that.
The library honors their memory as a place to sort of think about the connections that the people of East Anglia made with the Americans during the war, which I thought was really, really sweet because I found growing up in East Anglia, a lot of people, they didn't dislike the Americans, they just didn't take to them too well. But hearing a different side of it this past weekend was really sweet.
They called it the friendly invasion, right?
They called it the friendly invasion.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what I heard growing up was that I grew up around a lot of military men anyway, and for
Mm-hmm.
some reason they had some kind of distaste for the Americans that were stationed locally. I don't know why.
Okay.
But going from World War II, calling it the friendly invasion, to then growing up around other men that didn't
Mm-hmm.
particularly take to them too well, I much preferred this version than the version I've heard. Um, it started with a guy called Mark Collins. He began the talk,
Okay.
and he is the chair of the Norfolk Broads Society. The talk was his idea because he wanted to extend his knowledge on the environment of the Norfolk Broads during the
Mm-hmm.
war. A lot of his like inclusions were him sitting back and learning, essentially. So
I
he's more
appreciate that.
yeah,
That
he's
like
more
he's involved, but like set
he
something
was
up so
so
that he could
willing
learn
to
more.
learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
He even began his talk, like his part of the talk, saying, I'm more environment focused as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
history focused. So yeah, I also really appreciated the fact that he set up the talk in order to gain some more knowledge himself, which would then make his job, another learning curve. And then the talk moved on to our friend, Dr. Hattie Hearn,
Love Hattie.
who was on our previous episode about the Red Cross. So it was really nice to listen to her talk again for half an hour. So I was just sat like very, very cute, or like, that's my friend. Um, she spoke a lot about how the coastal and inland defenses were created in East Anglia to
Okay.
stop the German invasion, essentially.
Which you
Um,
don't think of because when you think of East
no,
Anglia during World War II, you think of the air war.
you think of the air war, yeah.
You don't
A
think
lot,
that they're setting up a
yeah,
you don't think they're setting up a perimeter to stop the
yeah,
Germans from coming up the coast. Like
hmm
it doesn't automatically click. Like
yeah,
obviously you think of it like if you sit and think about it, but it's not the first thought that comes to mind when you
yeah.
think of East Anglia during World War II. You immediately are associated with, okay, B-17 is the air war.
Yeah, you are mostly thinking of what happened in the sky as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
them setting up, because obviously the edge of East Anglia is a coastal line.
Right.
So that's what they were doing in the early 40s, because in England the war began in 39. So they were already thinking about ways to stop the invasion coming to them. The possibility of invasion by Germany was somewhat of a threat. They only said somewhat. They weren't expecting it, but they still created those defenses to stop or to hamper any attempts.
Right.
And then it moved on to something about when I was younger and I was in like history class in primary school,
Hmm.
elementary school, um, obviously they said that the countryside was a little bit safer than living in the cities that were being bombed, or like London during the Blitz.
Right.
Obviously kids were evacuated to the countryside. Um, but really living in the countryside, particularly in East Anglia, was quite dangerous because of accidents and aircraft collisions. They could collide in the sky and it would just,
Right.
the aircraft
Rain.
could
Right. It would just
break,
rain down
rain down.
on people's
Um,
homes. Yeah, of course.
yeah. So there was a lot of talk about that, which again I really appreciated because it's things you just don't think of. You're like, oh, the Americans are here, they're fighting the air war, they're gonna go home eventually. You don't really think about the in-between of they could crash and all their stuff rains down. They're
Right.
gonna
Those
crash
planes are
and fall into
loaded
the
with,
sea.
most B-17s were loaded with tons of bombs,
Yeah,
like the weight
yeah.
of it. And
Hmm.
imagine that crowd, like imagine that exploding over somebody's home.
Yeah. And not even that, there's obviously if they didn't get to drop the bombs on a mission, they would like salvo them in the sea,
Hmm.
which, it's obviously not as big as the Atlantic
Right.
Ocean or the Pacific Ocean. It would just be in the sea in this tiny little seaside town. Um, so they're still like digging up bombs and grenades now. Like Hattie was talking about, this happened a few months ago,
Hmm.
where a young boy was digging and he found a grenade, an unexploded, like an undetonated grenade.
Right.
So they had to call in the bomb squad
Oh my
and like
gosh.
evacuate people from their homes in this village. And then they said, oh yeah, you can go back into your houses now. They had to evacuate this entire village. This was like, I think she said it was like January or maybe the tail end of 24. It was really
Oh my
recent.
God.
So they're still finding
Right.
um like bombs, grenades. She showed us a picture of an airplane wing that had been pulled out of the sea, and even that was like 70 or 80 something. So still quite recent, really. And it would make sense because a lot of the I guess the hit points, it would be like the splashes. You remember in
Right.
Masters of the Air where
Hmm.
Bubbles is really sick and he tells Cross to take them to Splasher 6?
Yes.
That's Great Yarmouth, which is a seaside town.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of them would join up in formation over the water, and 5% of all bombers were lost during formation. So they would all
So
be falling
essentially,
into
where are
the
they getting
sea.
lost? Over homes, into the sea, like,
Yeah,
so yes, it makes sense that this is now still being dug up and
yeah,
found.
all being dug up and found. One of the stories I found, there were so many stories that she told. She showed us a clip of Target for Today, which you can find on YouTube. And it showed how short the runways were because essentially they couldn't build them all big enough in time. So they had to just make
Right.
do
They were crunched for
with,
time.
yeah, had to make do with what they had. Um, there was one story that she told, I believe it was the 467th bomb group, where it was typical weather in East Anglia. It was foggy, it was raining, and they gave them the go ahead. They showed a green flare and said, you can go. Mission's still on. Because of the short runway, they had no visibility. So one fort crashed, and then they said send the second one. So another fort crashed into that one. There was a third that ended up taking off but couldn't see, so they crashed on top. And you would think,
They
that's still
sent a
too many.
fourth?
They sent a fourth one.
God.
Um, it was crazy, but they had no choice. They had
That's
to
like,
fight the war. They had to like go up in the
right.
air and bomb these.
they
these
had
places. They
to
had to.
learn to navigate through through the conditions, because
Yeah,
we say all the time you can't control the weather.
especially there.
You
My
can't. You
goodness.
can't control the weather, but
Yeah,
to now they have to learn to navigate. They have to learn to
yeah,
navigate in general. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a lot. To have to learn to navigate through that kind of soup,
Mm.
that's
A lot of their flights were instruments only
yeah.
because they just couldn't see. And it's typical East Anglian weather where it's foggy 8 a.m. and by 9:20 it's blazing sun.
Yeah.
And then by 10 it's raining heavily and you're wet through. It's very unpredictable. So, but I also understand why they kept sending these planes out on these tiny small runways. Um, there was a lot of interesting stories. The one that I found the most interesting was there was two stories. There was one about the Kirby kids. It was a village called Kirby in Norfolk, and two forts had crashed in the village of Kirby, and the women and the children that lived in the village ran out of their houses to help these men that had crashed. They were pulling out burning men.
Oh my
They
God.
were helping those injured. They were trying to help those that had passed away. Um, and these kids all bonded because of it. I mean, obviously, you're going to. These kids all bonded because of it, and they still have reunions today with the relatives of the people that they either, saved from the
Oh, I
wreckage.
love that.
They're still having reunions today. Like, if some of the quote unquote kids have passed, it's their children or their grandchildren in the reunion. The relatives of the people that were lost during the wreckage, they still go over to Kirby. I think Hattie said every couple years. I don't remember exactly what she said because it kind of dropped out for me for a second on that one. Um,
That's incredible.
it was so that was I mean, I don't cry easily anymore these days, but I was kind of like, okay, because these kids just, without even questioning it, just helped. And
Yeah.
then they all became friends and they still today have some kind of reunion. I'm not sure how many years goes between them, but it was the fact that it was the kids of these kids
Mhm.
and the relatives of those that were lost or injured. um, they still they still reunite and meet up and stuff, which is really sweet. The other story I found interesting was called The Night of the Intruders. This is a story I hadn't heard before, even growing up. Hadn't heard it. It was April 1944, and the target was an Axis railway and a marshalling yard. This is one of the first night bombing runs that the 8th did. Um, the destruction of these targets would help in the run up to D-Day.
Okay.
So it was kind of like a mission to show the opposition, you know what's coming, just let it happen, type thing. Um, Under the cover of darkness, German forces followed them home, followed the 8th home.
Oh my God.
So bombers were hit and destroyed on the way back to base. There was 11 aircraft losses in less than 30 minutes,
Jesus Christ.
which was insane to me. They just followed them home. Because they could.
Because they could.
There's no lights. There was no, I believe they sent off flares and that is what might have attracted them.
I
But
feel like
obviously
that was the
there's
Germans, like Germany during the war, the German army. I feel like that was their MO, because we can.
literally because we can. And
Like, I don't. You learn about it, like you learn about it in school, and you're like, but why?
mm,
But why did Germany?
yeah,
Why did they do this? Why did they declare war? That, and as we get older and as we dig more and more, I
mm,
feel like you just saying that
just because they
because
could.
we can,
Yeah,
because we can, right? This isn't
yeah,
like, why are you taking that road trip? Why are you doing it? No, because we
because
can.
we can.
No, why are you declaring war? Because we're Germany, because we
Just
can.
because we can.
And I
Yeah,
think that really sums up like
yeah.
the definition of their MO during the war is
Mm.
just well, we're going to
just
kill as many
because we
people as
could,
we can because we can.
just because we can. Yeah.
And in a way, like it just makes my skin crawl in a way. Like
Yeah.
that people were that there was somebody in the world at a time that was that heartless.
I will say that this event was that amount of losses in that amount of time in less than
Mhm.
30 minutes. I know that there were a lot of doubting Thomases at the beginning of the 8th Air Force
Oh yeah.
saying that daytime bombing is not gonna work. It needs to be nighttime. I feel like this, as late as it was, proved to the people that had doubts that daylight bombing was more efficient
At
than
least you could
nighttime
see them
bombing.
coming.
You could see him coming.
You can defend
Um,
yourself.
yeah. Whereas this, so if you think 11 aircraft, there's what, 10 men
10
aboard?
men to an aircraft,
So that's 110 men in less than
half an hour.
half an hour. How is that?
No.
That's why, that's why the English suffered such losses because they would bomb in the nighttime.
Yeah.
So, they use these poor men as bait to get the job done, which is, I kind of understand that late in war. I mean, there's even a scene again
Mm.
in Masters of the Air where Colonel Bennett's talking to Rosenthal and says, bait, we're going to use
Well,
you as bait.
that's what
So,
that's what they read a piece of text about Ira Eaker when we were in England in April when
yeah.
I was over last month, where Jonas Moore and Adam Long read this dialogue, and it
Mm,
was about the change in strategy in the air war,
yeah.
where the essentially the job of the P-51 was to bring the bombers back alive,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden it was the bombers are the bait, the P-51s are going out and doing the attacking,
Hmm.
and that was the shift.
It's such a
I
scary
mean, that is
thought.
the shift in the air war.
Mm,
You can
yeah.
pinpoint it.
Yeah. There was it kind of that there was a lot of the losses, a lot of the crashes in
Hmm.
this talk and like where they landed in the Broads, and how that did sort of affect the environment,
Oh, of
not
course.
so much as in nature, but environment as like a place to live, if that makes
Yeah, of
sense.
course.
It's dangerous, it's scary. A lot of these kids were evacuated from the city to get away from the war, and yet they've moved somewhere where it's essentially on their doorstep. So that must have been extremely scary.
And when
Um,
you're a kid, you don't know, like,
yeah,
you
you
don't
you
know the
don't
whole picture of
you
it,
don't understand the whole, yeah. But luckily it kind of the talk took a happier turn where Hattie spoke about the flak houses on the Broads,
Mhm.
which I know that we're trying to look into. I think we could do a whole episode on
I
flak
think
houses because again,
we're gathering our information on the flag
yeah,
houses because there were a lot of them.
there was a lot of them. The two that Hattie spoke about were called Close Burn
Mhm.
and the Glades.
I think they're both in
Essentially,
that book that I have. I
yeah,
brought home a book, one of many books that I brought home with me from Fort Babbitt's. I think I bought a book on just the flag houses, and
yeah,
I remember, I'm not sure about Closeburn, but definitely I
the
believe the Glades are
Glades is in
definitely in
there.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, same theme, Red Cross girls taking care of men, and they had tea time and croquet and tennis, badminton, sailing, rowing,
Rowing,
um,
riding with hounds.
riding with hounds. And a lot of them really took to the area. They found it really beautiful. Obviously, they're in a quiet part away from any airbase for
Oh,
a
of
couple
course.
days.
Yeah.
So having that R&R, I'm sure, really helped. There was a few accidents, however. One that Hattie mentioned was a guy called Charles who was knocked overboard on a boat while at the Flag House. I don't believe he passed away from that, but he was still injured, I believe. He's not, he's not in the air fighting, but now he's been knocked off a boat and like banged his head and
So a non-combat related
yeah,
injury.
even when he's trying to relax, he's still kind of getting injured. But she mentioned that life on the ground for these Americans offered an antidote to combat. So going
Right.
somewhere really relaxing. She
And they
also
would take
told,
them out of, they would not be in uniform at the flag houses. They would
no,
be
they would
offered
be in
civilian clothes.
civvies.
So it really takes them out of
Yeah,
the, really takes them out of the,
normalcy.
that, yeah, it gives them a sense
Yeah.
of maybe being on vacation or home
Yeah.
or something akin to just regular life.
Yeah. And she also mentioned that um there was a bond between these airmen and the locals. A lot of them would invite them for dinner. A lot of them would invite them to church.
Sweet.
Um, Christmas, things like that, Christmas dinner. Like obviously you would get a Christmas dinner or a Thanksgiving dinner on base, but a lot of the local families would invite a lot of the airmen
That's nice.
into their houses for Christmas. I believe even if you tried to celebrate Thanksgiving to make them feel more at home, they didn't know we don't celebrate Thanksgiving in England. So, but they tried
Well,
at
you guys are missing
least.
out in England. I mean, Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays.
I call it practice Christmas because
Practice
I
Christmas.
get to practice what I'm making for Christmas dinner
Uh,
on Thanksgiving, so I know what to do and
I
where to
can't
go.
even say that we can call it practice Christmas in my family because we're Italian and our Christmas dinner is not
It's not traditional. I
it's
know.
not the traditional American Christmas
Yeah,
dinner that you would
yeah,
see in like, the Good Housekeeping magazine.
yeah.
No,
It's not.
it's not.
Um, Hattie also told a story at the end about a guy called John McClane Jr. He was of the 44th Bomb Group and he met a girl from Norwich. And her parents really took to him. I believe there was no romantic connection. It was platonic.
Oh, okay.
But they welcomed him into their home and they had a holiday home on the Norfolk Broads and they would bike there, I believe, every weekend and they just started inviting him whenever he had time
Oh,
off or was
sweet.
grounded. So while he also got to go to the Flack House, he also got to go to this holiday
He had
home
like a
independently.
family kind of,
Yeah.
that
And he,
adopted him, but
yeah, he said that he felt really at home in England and that he missed it. And I believe he went back a few times and visited with the friend that he'd made and her family.
oh, that's so
Um,
nice.
So it ended on a really sweet note. A lot of the chunk at the start was all these losses and how it affected the
Right,
environment and how these people lived. They went from essentially a very quiet life to something very busy and scary.
right,
But they
right.
still took these men into their homes and they really loved them. And a lot of the kids that bonded with the airmen got very depressed when these men went home because the kids had just hung out with the men
Yeah.
for, if you think about it, two,
Two,
almost three
3 years.
years.
Yeah.
So they got really depressed when these men went home. Um, but it was a really great talk. It gave me a lot of knowledge about where I grew up. I'm sort of beating myself up for not taking notice sooner because I literally lived in it
Right.
essentially. So, but no, it was really great. I really enjoyed it. And I really did appreciate the man that it was his idea to have the talk. I appreciate that he introduced himself and then sat back and let Hattie do her thing. It was really great. And the American Library was really involved as well. I believe the talk is on their website as a podcast episode. So if you want to go listen to that as well, apart from me just yapping about it in like in a short, rushed way, um, it was really knowledgeable and very intensive. I really, really enjoyed it.
I'm gonna check it
It
out
was great. Yeah, absolutely, you
because
should.
definitely something that I would have joined you for.
Yeah, it was wonderful. But you were busy doing something equally as cool that we should tell everyone about.
Yeah. I was in Boston last weekend.
And it looked beautiful.
Well, Boston is one of my favorite cities. Which I don't know how many New Yorkers will say that Boston is one of their favorite cities, but Boston is one of my favorite cities. I enjoy it up there. I feel comfortable up there. I feel, I know my way around. I feel safe up there.
Mm.
So to go was, was a no-brainer. It's close
Yeah.
enough to home. So I hopped on a flight last Saturday morning, super early, and 40 minutes. I mean,
Yeah, you were
to fly from
literally
New
in
York
and
to
out.
Boston is definitely the way to do it. You're up and down in 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So the event was hosted jointly by it was hosted primarily by Andrew Biggio from The Rifle,
Mm.
who is The Rifle on Instagram. So
Go
go
follow.
follow Andrew.
He's great.
Not gonna say it again. Go follow Andrew. But it was Andrew, and it was hosted in conjunction with We Happy Few.
Hmm.
So Matt Leach and his gang.
He's back again.
He's his gang of, as he affectionately called us, nerdlings. Um, but it was on Saturday. It was the prequel to the Boston Wounded Vets run. So that happened on Sunday. So the run up to that was on Saturday, and it was hosted at the Encore Hotel and Casino. So they had
Which
this
was beautiful, by the way.
beautiful. They had a giant event room in the back of the
Mm.
hotel. They had a silent auction they were selling books. And We Happy Few brought in 8 cast members from Band of Brothers to do a talk.
Yeah.
And Andrew brought in 18 World War II veterans. And to be in that room was just,
Oh, yeah, I can bet.
I said to one of our friends that was with us, Rita, I said, there's something about, I just don't feel like I should be in this room.
Yeah.
And she was like, why? I said, because I just can't put my finger on why I felt that way for a moment, but I did. But you really, you have to absorb how special it is to be in the presence of, no shade to the Band of Brothers fellas. No
You are
shade.
still the OGs, we promise.
It is very special to be in a room with you boys, but to be in a room with 18 men
That is very special, all
who
18.
fought and served and
Yeah.
gave so much, you have to time to just take a moment to sit back and absorb that. And these men were, oh my God, so lovely and just so generous to be there and to sign the book. I picked up a copy of Andrew's book, The Rifle. There's The Rifle, and then there's The Rifle 2, which is a continuation of, and it's stories of World War II veterans that Andrew himself has gone out and built relationships with these men and been gracious enough to tell their story for us to read. The men that were there signed my copy of the book.
That's sweet.
And I really am so thankful for that. And then there was the 8 members of Band of Brothers. Andrew hosted a kind of, not Q&A, it was kind of just like a casual talk. The boys were very relaxed. So he was showing clips of Band of Brothers, and then they were talking about what it was like to be in that moment, what it was like to film it, to know their veteran, those of them that were still alive at the time. Did they know the man that they portrayed? So there was, in the room, there was James Matteo, Rick Warden, Mark Lawrence, Mark Huberman, Peter Young, the 2 Marks, Peter Youngblood Hills, Peter McCabe, Renee Moreno, and our friend, Matt Leach.
He's back again.
And also sitting up with the men was Chris Langlois, who is Doc Rowe's grandson.
Wow.
So he was there to represent Doc Rowe. He's
very
good friends
special.
with Matt and the We Happy Few gang, and he's just very, very nice. It was such a pleasure to meet Chris.
Yeah.
It was a real pleasure to meet all of the guys, but Chris has written 3 children's books about paratroopers.
Yeah.
And I love that he does this to engage children in what was World War II. So big shout out to Chris for keeping people
Chris
involved.
also seems like the nicest man.
He is the nicest man. Chris is such a sweet guy. Such a nice guy. He has this really cool, very relaxed presence, makes you feel very comfortable, which was really, really nice. Because, you get a little little nervous, like, because you don't like, you gotta kind of like feel like you don't want to be like,
Yeah, you don't want to be
you've
too
been watching Band of
pushy.
Brothers for 25 years, and it's
Yeah.
not, you don't want to be pushy, but you gotta kind of like feel them out a little bit. But everybody that was there was so sweet.
That's good.
Everybody
I knew
that
they
was
would
there
be.
was super
Knew they
sweet.
would.
Um,
There was two stories that you told me of them doing like their little talk.
mm,
And the two that really stuck out, I believe it was Mark Huberman talking about Frank John Hughes that played Wild Bill. And didn't
yes.
they not talk the entire time
So
they were
Mark
shooting?
Mark Huberman portrayed Lester Hashi,
Yeah.
who was a replacement
Yeah.
with the 101st. And he was a replacement in Easy Company, and he came in with for real. Lester Hashi came in with Babe Heffron,
Yes.
and Babe Heffron was immediately taken under Wild Bill's wing because
They're from the same place.
South Philly
Yeah.
boys stick together, right?
Yeah.
So in the show, in
Mm.
filming, Robin Lang was immediately taken under Frank John Hughes' wing. That was his guy, right?
Isn't that
And
what Bill told him to do as
yes,
well?
Wild
Because
Bill
they
kind
were
of
best
gave
friends.
Frank this kind of nudge, like, no, that's
Yeah.
going to be
That's your guy.
that's your guy, right?
Yeah.
Don't leave him out in the dust with the rest of the replacements, sort of thing. And Mark Huberman told this story about how the real Bill and Babe came to set. So I think if you ever watch episode 4, I'm sure everybody has seen it by now. Babe
Yeah.
Heffron is sitting there in the liberation of Holland,
Yeah.
and he's waving his flag, and he's just so cute.
He's so cute. He's like, hello.
They put him right in there.
I love him.
And
Very cute.
Mark Huberman asked Wild Bill, did he remember Lester Hashi? And he made some remark about how
Didn't like him.
at first he was like, I didn't get on, didn't like him. And then what Frank John Hughes kind of iced out Mark Huberman for the rest of the shoot. Because that's what they did. And it wasn't that they say it all the time, that it wasn't that they didn't like the replacements, but they were coming in and replacing their friends that had either gotten killed or wounded.
Wounded, yeah.
Or gone home. And they didn't want to see more young green men, boys essentially, get killed. So they distanced themselves from the replacements so that they wouldn't get close and wouldn't feel any sort of gut-wrenching pain at this point, to see them also, God forbid, get killed, get hurt.
Because a lot of them were so much younger than the original Takala guys.
Yeah.
And they had spent years together.
That's it.
Training.
Right.
And then these replacements come in and they're like, I don't want anything to do with you because I've just lost 5 of my best friends that I spent 2-3 years of my life with. I understand, but I do find that very funny that Frank John Hughes is so method.
That's what they kept saying it.
That he said
that
no.
Frank John Hughes was super method.
I appreciate
that he was super method during the filming. I
appreciate that. Yeah.
And I remember there was an episode on the Band of Brothers podcast. The podcast that came out where there was 10 episodes and they had 10 different cast members kind of.
Yeah.
And Frank John Hughes said he had gone to the airport to pick up Babe and Bill. And they missed their first flight. And he went in his full uniform.
Did he?
To pick them up. And he had to sit at Heathrow and wait for them because they were on the next flight. And that they came off the plane and he stood there and he saluted them. And Wild Bill came out on his crutches and just kind of blew past him. And Babe came behind, kind of carrying the 2 pieces of luggage, and was like, oh, he needs a cigarette, Bill or Frank. And he was outside. But Frank John Hughes, everybody says it, was super method during filming. Yeah. He really immersed himself in who Bill Garnier was.
Which I find extremely respectful because the
100%.
Man is there watching you literally become him. So he wants you to be him, down to the mannerisms. You can even tell when you look at Frank John Hughes that he has sort of changed his face.
Yes, the way he
to mimic,
pronounces his jaw when he speaks. Yeah, he doesn't just, didn't just get a dialect coach and learn an accent. He
No,
really
he
became who he
really,
was.
yeah, it's really
Um,
wonderful. I really appreciate that.
but there was some really great stories. I mean, Rick Warden met
Mm,
Harry Welsh's grandkids that weekend. They came out for the event, and he was talking about how Tom Hanks said to him, "One day you're going to be in an elevator and somebody's going to say, 'Didn't you play?'"
yeah.
And Rick Warden said it took 25 years and it wasn't in an elevator, but Harry Welsh's two grandchildren were at the
He
event
hadn't met
last
them
weekend.
before.
No.
Oh my God.
And they were in the green room in the back, and he got to meet them for the first time.
Oh my God.
And it was just
That's so
such a
lovely.
lovely thing to kind of
Oh,
be in the room to witness him
yeah.
saying that. And
That's very sweet. I love that.
um and then
Ooh.
nobody loves William Dukeman more than Mark Lawrence.
Oh my God, he's
I don't
so,
think anybody respects him short of William Dukeman's family.
yeah.
Nobody loves and cares and respects him and takes that memory through life
Mm.
with them more than Mark Lawrence.
It really stuck with him,
It
it
did. It
seems.
really
He
impacted
like
him. It really
he
stuck with
embedded it.
him. He has Dukeman's service number tattooed on
He
his
does.
arm, and he showed us
Yeah, he
during
did. Getting it out.
Matt Leach made him show us. Matt Leach was like, "Oh, show them."
Show everyone in the
So he
audience.
very discreetly kind of just took the sleeve of his button down
That's
and
very
showed us
sweet.
the tattoo on his arm. And he always refers to Dukeman as my guy. That's my guy.
Oh,
And
that is so sweet.
I thought it was just really wonderful.
Yeah.
Um,
He's the one that, he always says the moment you stop saying their
yes.
name is
And
when they really, really die.
he does. And I think that that's so important that,
Hmm.
and that's not the first time we've mentioned it on this podcast. That's not going
But
to
I
be
feel
and it
like,
will not be the last.
no,
I
I
can
feel like
guarantee
it's,
you, but
I
it's
feel like it's
something that
him though.
sticks. That's very, it
Yeah,
is. It's
it's
something that
definitely
sticks.
him
He
that's
said it
influenced
again
it.
on Saturday that, you die two deaths. It's the
Yeah,
first. And then when the last time somebody says your name, you
yeah.
die for the final time.
Mm.
And the fact that there are so many people that are allowing these men to continue to live on and helping
Yeah.
their legacy, helping their memory live on for future generations,
Yeah.
not just our generation that, you and I are in our 30s and, a lot of people would turn around and say, oh, a lot of people your age aren't really
Mm.
involved in it and they
But that's why
don't
we do
respect it.
it.
But that's why we do it.
Hmm.
We have to keep these names alive. And
Yeah.
I love that is that's the kind of message that Mark Lawrence takes with him
Yeah.
through his day to day
Yeah.
is that, he kind of lives in a way that William Dukeman didn't get to
You
live.
get to do,
You're
yeah.
doing this with somebody else in mind as well, like
Yeah.
living my life to the fullest and doing as best as I can because somebody else didn't get to do that.
And I'm sure his family really appreciate that too.
I can almost guarantee that the
Yeah.
family of William Dukeman that's still out there is so
Yeah.
appreciative of it. And I think that as a fan, as what I started out as an initial just fan of Band of Brothers, right? Because it's a show, but then you start to dig and dig as you and I do.
As we do.
As we do. You start to dig and you start to see that there's more to it. And these men that portrayed these real life men respect it and carry it with them. And the fact that 25 years later, they're still gathering in a room to tell stories of their
And they're all
veterans.
still friends.
And they're all still friends.
You
that it stuck
can
with
tell.
them. It wasn't just a job. It
No.
wasn't just an acting job for them. It was something that changed the course of the way that they operate as people.
Yeah, absolutely. And
which is
a lot of
such an amazing thing.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of them really took it to heart and embedded it. And
Yes.
I probably change them as actors too, probably change them as performers. You know, like
People.
you just said, they have someone else to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Probably forever. I do feel the same about the Masters of the Air guys, because they're kind of close.
I think they're
Um,
very close for the
and
most part. They're very
I feel
close.
like a lot of that has kind of, I get the same vibe from them as I do the Band of Brothers
Yes.
guys.
Yes.
So I'm really glad that they are still, all these years later, they're still friends. They probably have a very silly WhatsApp group chat or
Oh, I would
something.
guarantee it.
And the
I
fact that
would
it's
guarantee it.
25 years. Um, you said, did you buy the book while you were
I
there, The
did.
Rifle?
I did buy
Did
the
you buy
book.
1 and 2 or just 1?
I just bought one
Mm.
to start because A, luggage space, carry-on space.
Yes, of course.
Carry-on space. And I can only read one book at a time.
No, it's fair. Understandable.
And I'm also starting to run out of room on my bookshelf and considering where I can put
What?
another bookshelf in my place. So right now we started with one.
Good. Okay.
Don't worry, Andrew, I will buy the second one.
Andrew will buy the second one.
I will buy the second one. But the event on Saturday was the run-up to the Boston Wounded Vets Run on
Yes.
Sunday. I had a very early flight home on Sunday.
Oh God.
I was supposed to have a very early flight home on Sunday.
Yeah.
I was supposed to have a 9:15 flight home on Sunday.
It didn't happen.
I didn't leave Boston until after 4 o'clock.
Horrific.
I cooled my heels in the airport for quite a while.
You could have just gone to the.
Had I known, and I said this to my dad, I said, had I known, I would have gone.
I would have just gone
And
to
he
the
said
actual
to me,
thing.
and he said to me, he goes, yeah, you would have gotten there and they would have said, your flight's no longer delayed.
Yeah, that
He
probably
goes,
would have happened.
so he goes, just consider yourself lucky that you made it home.
Yeah, exactly. Because it was a long
It was a
delay
long
for
day.
no reason.
I kept texting Winnie going, we're delayed another half hour. We're delayed again. We're delayed again.
It was half an hour increments.
And it
for
was
6 hours.
Where was this plane coming from? Pittsburgh. Why was it delayed in Pittsburgh? No reason.
Just
reason.
Felt like it.
But shout out to JetBlue for the $12 meal voucher.
Wow.
Whole
Generous.
$12.
Hey, at least you had a really
Shout
good
out to JetBlue
weekend
though
before that.
for the flight credit on the way home though, because
Exactly.
they did credit me for the flight.
As
so
they
I got some money
should.
back on that.
As they should.
As they should. But had I known, I would have maybe timed my travel a little differently.
Yeah.
Because it was a motorcade of hundreds, probably close to thousands of Harleys and motorcycles and police cars with the lights and the sirens. And it was just an event that I think next year, God willing, I would like to be up there for.
Yeah.
I would really like to be up there for that. Then we'll do it.
We'll do it.
Because
I think we should.
Andrew is the founder of the Boston Wounded Vets Run.
Yeah.
So this was the 14th anniversary. So next year, I would really like to make it up there to do that.
Be a big one.
Take the podcast up to Boston and do something special up there with it.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Which would be really fun.
I would really love that.
But I have the utmost respect for Andrew for what he does. He's not only a veteran himself and in law enforcement, but he takes such care with these veterans' stories, and there's such pride in what he does. You could see it. He's very proud of being able to do it, and I think being in the room to see it happen was just so beautiful. But I really have the utmost respect for Andrew.
In the few little bits that I've read of the Rifle, like certain quotes or like excerpts and stuff, you can absolutely tell that he has so much respect for the people that he is talking to, and you can tell that he worked really hard to gain their trust, and I'm sure that was also difficult for these vets to
because a lot of these veterans don't want to talk about it. They shut it down. They shut it out of their lives. They kind of close the door.
Yeah, because like, in the 40s it was pull yourself up, get on
back
with
up
it,
and keep going.
You're fine. I know you just lost your best friend, but you got to get on with it. And I feel like they carried that over to now, so they still haven't spoken about it.
There's a lot that, like, you and I are reading a lot of books. Like, we're reading Frank Murphy's book, or I'm reading it now, you're reading it again.
Yeah.
he talks about how when he came home from the war, he just kind of
Yeah.
continued.
He
He was just like,
just
okay, picked up his life as a civilian and kept going. And it
carried
took
on.
him until the 60s or 70s
Yeah, he's on a flight
going
to
on a business
England.
trip.
Yeah.
Not even like of his own accord. He was just going on a business trip over England, and it kind of started to spark those memories again. And that's when he opened the door back
It's like, yeah, it's like his
and started to
brain
delve in.
clicked. Because
Yes.
he says that he looks out the window of this commercial
He
airplane.
was on
He's
a commercial
flying
airplane, yeah.
and he sees certain landmarks or certain things
That
that
he
he would have
remembers
had
seeing
to
in
point out.
43 on their way over there. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think the fact that Andrew has gained the trust of
it's a
these
big
veterans,
thing.
it's a
Mm.
big thing. It's a big thing. They were just, I felt like I clammed up. I didn't know what to say other
Yeah,
than,
because yeah, what are you meant to
and a
say?
lot of
You know,
them, they're very quiet. You ask them to sign your copy of the
tired.
book, they're tired. You ask them to sign your copy of the book and they smile and they sign it, or they very carefully print their name. But then you get people like Lester Schrank, who was at the very end of the table, who was a ball turret gunner
Mm.
on a B-17. He was a POW. He's 102 years old. And I very carefully said, that I was, because that's the thing too, you have to be very careful in how you phrase what you want to say,
Yeah.
that I was learning more about the air war,
Mm.
taking my time to learn more about the air war, that we were digging into it with our podcast. And with all the gusto of a 102-year-old, God bless him, said to me, you want to know more about me? Type this into Google. And he
And
gave
we
me,
did.
and we did. We Googled him.
We did.
And there is quite a lot.
And it's
There's
from
quite a lot.
from the
And
American Air Museum. There's
from
a
the
whole
American Air
profile.
Museum. And I was just, there's the juxtaposition of how some of the men are just very reserved and very quiet. And then there's men like Lester who will very boisterously tell you to Google them or to Google this or pull out your phone and do
Yeah.
this. And it's, the way he said with such authority, pull out your phone and Google this, you almost feel like you have to salute him and say,
Like,
yes,
oh my
sir.
God, okay, yeah, I'll do it. Oh my
Yes.
God.
And I, yes, did not hesitate.
Just type his name in real quick.
It was just a moment. And again,
Yeah.
I said to my dad, I said, it really drives home how important it is to keep, again, back to keep saying their name.
Yeah.
Just keep telling people stories.
Yeah. And I again, it kind of drove home why we do this.
Yes.
We have to keep saying these people's names and telling their stories and reading about them and learning about them. And, I feel like a lot of it is for them in their honor. And I feel like they would be very happy with that.
Oh, yeah. We don't do this for ourselves.
No, not at all.
In a way, we do it for
In a
ourselves
way,
because we want to
yeah.
learn more.
Yeah. So that's
But we're not doing
helpful.
it for attention.
No,
is the thing.
absolutely not. Yeah.
We do this for other people. We do this so
Mm.
that other people can learn. We dig things up all
Yeah.
the time and we say to each other, did you know this? A lot of
Yeah.
times I'll be at work and my phone will go off and it's Winnie with a
And it's
link.
me
And
with some
did
nonsense.
you know this? Read this when you take a break for lunch or whatever.
Yeah.
And you read it and you go, oh my God. And then I sit there and I go, if we didn't know this, right?
No one else
How many other
might not
people
know it.
didn't know this?
Yeah.
This is why we want to talk about it so that other people know
Yeah.
the importance and the the interesting stories, the gut-wrenching stories. There's funny stories too. I
There
mean,
is.
you really get into there's some stories where you read it and
Yeah.
go, oh my God.
And I feel like we are constantly learning all the time. Like my brain hasn't been this active
I have not been,
years.
yes. I have not read as many books in the last couple of years, and
Yeah,
that's simply
same.
because I have been in this funk of get up, go to work, come home. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
tired. I'm this and that.
Us go to bed.
I can't tell you how many times I've almost missed my stop going or coming to work on the bus because I'm so
Because
into
we're
my book.
reading.
Yeah.
Speaking of the books, we have a new little fun idea that I believe we've already posted about, but we are beginning a little book club.
Yeah, we're gonna do a quarterly book club.
Yeah.
We're gonna start it out as a quarterly book club,
Yeah.
simply for time.
Yes, we all of
Simply
us
for
don't
time.
have that much time to read all of those things all at the same time.
But we will be picking a book, and
You're welcome to read along
you're
with
welcome.
us,
Yes, you're
and
welcome
yep,
to read along with us and
give us your own review, and
send
we
in
can
your
talk about it.
thoughts.
Yeah.
Send it in on Instagram, message it to us, email it to us,
Yeah.
thedonutdollieспod@gmail.com. You can send us an email with your opinion or your thoughts on the book. Or if you have a book recommendation,
Yeah, drop that in
send it
too.
in. Drop it in our inbox. I guess this was kind of like a little catch up and recap.
Yeah, it really was.
This was a good one.
Yeah,
And this was
it
fun.
was. It was nice to share the thing that we both did, because usually when you're away, I'm kind of at home holding down the fort, essentially.
I've
on
only been
social
away. I've
media.
only ever been away one time before that.
I know, but both of those times I'm at home doing
Holding
I'm
it
the
down.
one in, yeah.
But you do a
But
wonderful job of holding it down.
thank you so much. I didn't miss one message. No, it's fine. But no, being able to like attend this talk was really great and really
I'm
educational.
glad that you did. And I'm
Yeah,
gonna
me
take the
too.
time this weekend, since it's a long weekend and it's Memorial Day weekend, to watch it on YouTube or watch it on their website.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very good.
Yes. And
Very, very good.
again, I highly recommend you follow the Rifle
Follow
on
the Rifle,
Instagram.
absolutely.
He's on Instagram and Andrew's on Facebook as well.
Yes.
There's quite a lot of clips from the weekend on his Instagram.
We'll be posting some too.
Yes, there's some in our Instagram stories as well. I believe they're archived under the travels highlight.
Yes.
And trying to think what else.
I think that's it.
I think we've covered everything
I think we've covered everything. Yeah. I think we have.
Thank you guys again for joining us. Stay tuned for some fun stuff. We got a lot of interesting topics.
We say that every time, but we do.
But we do. No,
We
everything's
actually do.
But everything's fun. Everything is fun
really
stuff.
is.
Everything's fun stuff.
Exactly.
And thank you to Andrew. Thank you to the veterans, Matt Leach, and the We Happy Few team. You guys are
They're excellent.
excellent. I know I
everything that
joke
they
that
do
I
is
know I
great.
joke that Matt can be a bit goofy and lighthearted and funny, but Matt really is.
He takes it so seriously.
He takes it so seriously. He does take it seriously.
He really does.
And it was great to see him and some of the other We Happy Few gang over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm glad we got to hoof it around Boston for a little while too.
Just for the day.
Just for the day.
Just for the day.
And thank you to Logan Airport for the tour, because I walked around all day.
Exactly. Free tour.
Free tour of Logan Airport. I walked around all day.
Thank you guys again for listening.
Thanks so much, you guys, and we will catch up with you soon.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.